The first bill on our agenda is House File 903, Representative Becker Finn, and I will move that House File 903 be referred to the General Register. Representative Becker Finn, I see you have DE2 amendment. Do you want me to move that first and then we can describe the bill?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
I'll move the DE2 amendment. It's the author's amendment. So all in favor of the DE2 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? We have the bill in the way that the author wants. Proceed with your testimony, and I see you've got testifiers here, and so go from there. Representative Becker Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know it's a busy week, so I will save most of my time for my testifiers. But House File 903 is a very important bill that is many decades actually in the making. And what House File 903 does, and just so folks know, the DE2 language is just it basically, the bill does the same thing. It just cleans up some things and gives a little bit more, fleshes things out a little bit so that it's more clear what we're doing here with House File 903. So so right now we have an executive order that requires our executive agencies to do tribal consultation with our 11 tribal nations here here in Minnesota. And this actually started back in the Pawlenty years, continued with Governor Dayton, and has been brought to kind of the next level under Governor Walz as far as consultation and treating the government to government relations that we really should have been doing from day one with our tribal nations. And so what this bill does is it takes the executive order that is currently in place and has, some form of the executive order has been in place for quite some time, and puts it into statute so that we have it in statute, and we can maintain those good relationships and that tribal consultation going forward, regardless of who the governor is, or who might be in charge of the executive orders going forward. And with that, I will turn it over to my testifiers. We have a couple folks here from the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, and as well as some others here to answer questions if folks have them.
Thank you, Representative Becker Finn. The first person I have on my list is Robert Larson. If you want to identify yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Amatak hello, my relatives. My name is Robert Larson. Many folks call me Deuce when they get to know me. I am the president of the Lower Sioux Indian community and also the chair of the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. Thank you for the the opportunity to testify in support of House File 903. My Dakota name is Tatanki Chop Tang Ta. Loosely translated, that is rolling bull, but it literally takes over a day to explain and understand the meaning of my name. In short, it's that lead bull when you have a herd and a storm or danger is coming. They gather that herd and they face that storm. And when everything is past and they look and see that everything's okay, it's when that bull is wallowing and kicking up dirt in celebration and gratitude. So just like to understand who I am. Thank you for that. There's so many difficult issues we face as a nation, as separate governments, and as human beings. They come down to one thing that we all can't live without, and that's relationships. When we do relationships well, everyone benefits. When we lose sight of the importance of relationships or stop working on them, negativity finds a place to grow in space left between. Relationship is a cornerstone of the bill you have before you, House File 903, and the concept of consultation between state and the tribes. Because no matter what, the state and the tribes today share many things, including geography and citizens, and we face many similar issues. Consultation is a critical way that we can strengthen our relationships and the good work that we can do together. House File 903 requires consultation by certain state agencies and administrative bodies for matters with tribal implications. This creates an expectation that issues that affect us will be discussed with us in a timely way and that our voices are heard in the decision-making process. But it does not mean that we have veto power over agency decisions. It does not mean that we will never disagree. But at a minimum, it should mean that we will communicate, and at best, we will find a mutually beneficial resolution, create strong partnerships, and reduce unnecessary and often expensive conflict. I want to emphasize that this bill does not only benefit the tribes. It is not just a way to fix racial injustice because of the moment we are in. A strong and broad consultation policy benefits the state just as much as the tribes. It is good governance. The state has obligations to all citizens of Minnesota, including those of us who are tribal members. Yet providing services for our population can be unique. By working in partnership with tribes, our systems can not only alleviate strain on local and state direct service providers, we can reduce the long-term strain on state institutions that are created by issues that go unresolved. There are a variety of agreements that state agencies have with tribes. We also deal with the complex jurisdictional issues that are best resolved through communication and engagement, not litigation, because a once solvable problem spiraled into a big problem. Excuse me. There are opportunities to work together on issues such as school instruction and awareness, which doesn't benefit only Indigenous children, it benefits every child. It benefits us all. To that same end, a critical element of the relationship between the state and the tribes is education for those state employees who are charged with working on tribal related matters. The existing tribal state relations training does just that. Those who first created the tribal state relations training knew that education necessarily creates a better capacity for understanding, for meaningful engagement, and for relationships. Imagine a Department of Human Service staff member who work on social service and mental health issues with tribes and Minnesota's Indigenous population. If he or she can be trained to understand generational trauma, the long-lasting effects of Indian boarding schools, and how our people are battling to break cycles and create healthy families, how much more meaningful and effective could the work of this state employee be? That is why House File 903, which codifies and builds on the policy of Executive Order 1924, includes tribal state relations training for certain staff, as well as the commissioners, deputy, and assistant commissioners. I'd like to finish as I began. As Dakota, I believe that I live in a relationship with every living thing. It's a responsibility and an honor to nurture those relationships. And so too does this bill reflect a responsibility, an honor, and an opportunity to strengthen the work our tribal nations do together in relationship with the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. The next person I have on my list is Shannon Giezick. Welcome to the committee, and please state your name for the tape.
Chair Nelson, committee members, Minogijigad. My name is Shannon Giezick. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council and a member of the Boys Fort Band of Chippewa. House File 903 codifies and builds upon Executive Order 1924 and the similar executive orders of past governors by focusing on the important work that occurs between the state of Minnesota and the 11 tribal nations within Minnesota's boundaries. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan said back in 2019, when Governor Walz signed Executive Order 1924, that it is time for policy being done to Indian people to stop, and for policy to be done in partnership with Native nations to begin and continue. That is precisely what this bill does. I want to briefly do two things here with my time today. The first is to provide a bit of background on the amendment that you see to the bill as introduced, and then secondly, highlight a few of the important elements of the amended language. The original language of House File 903 mirrored Executive Order 1924, incorporating input from the tribal leaders and tribal staff, and while communicating with the governor's tribal state relations team, revisions were developed with Representative Becker Finn to help further define some important concepts for consultation. We wanted to provide helpful but broad definitions that allowed each agency to develop policy that fits for its work. Feedback was solicited from the tribal liaisons for the state agencies who are right at the intersection of this work between the state and the tribes. The result is an amendment that builds upon Executive Order 1924. It requires that the agencies engage in timely and meaningful consultation for matters that have tribal implications. The definition of agencies includes those identified in Executive Order 1924 and administrative bodies that have strong potential for expanding communication and understanding through consultation. Matters that have tribal implications is defined to mean regulations, legislative proposals, policy statements, or other actions that have substantial direct effects on one or more Minnesota tribal governments or on the distribution of power and responsibilities between the state and the tribes. To reiterate what President Larson said, Chairman Larson stated, the bill does not do a number of important things. It does not require consultation before an agency can take emergency action on an immediate threat to the health, safety, or welfare of Minnesota citizens. It also does not require a consultation if both the tribe and the agency deems it's unnecessary to do so. It does not give the tribes any additional ability to challenge agency decisions, and it does not create a new cause of action or legal claim if, for example, an agency fails to consult. One of the statutory duties of MIAC is to recommend to state government the means to enhance the delivery of services to members of federally recognized tribes in Minnesota. To that end, we strongly recommend the consultation and education policies embodied in House File 903. Thank you to the committee, and miigwech to Representative Becker Finn. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Giezick. The next person I have on my list is Levi Brown. And if you want to again identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. My name is Levi Brown. Thanks for the opportunity to provide testimony on House File 903. MnDOT has over 1,211 miles of infrastructure that is located within Indian country, and we are responsible to maintain or upgrade this critical asset that all Minnesotans enjoy. This necessitates MnDOT to be constantly working government to government with tribal nations using diplomacy to ensure that the relationship is maintained, because often Minnesota state law is not the exclusive applicable law. As the Office of Tribal Affairs Director, I've learned a valuable lesson, which is to be successful, MnDOT and tribal nations must collaborate on any construction or maintenance work that may impact tribal nations. Our agency has made huge mistakes by not consulting with tribal nations. These mistakes have disturbed Dakota and Anishinaabe ancestral burial sites while causing delays and costing our agency millions of dollars. I bear witness to examples of tribal and state partnerships around land issues, whether it was the Red Bee Bridge on the Red Lake Nation or the Highway 200 project on the White Earth Nation that is currently correcting over 8 miles of incorrect right-of-way. It is these complex issues that can help guide us to the efficient solutions we all so dearly want to find. Land has historically driven a wedge between state and tribal government, but in a lot of ways, it's ironic that it's this preservation of land and cultural resources that may bring tribal and state governments to a lasting partnership. The partnership with tribal nations also includes MnDOT navigating certain regulatory processes. Example, Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit, and the 401 certification, in which some tribes have created their own federally approved water quality standards, which MnDOT must comply with. In closing, MnDOT cannot avoid a government-to-government relationship with tribal nations. As the designated tribal liaison under Executive Order 1924, I've been tasked with helping MnDOT be successful when working with tribal nations. And because of our historical norms, this task it seems impossible some days, but I do know that stabilizing a government-to-government relationship with tribal nations will increase efficiency and quality of transportation for all Minnesota residents. Miigwech.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have one other person here that's listed on my agenda as being here to answer questions. Miss Jessie Stomsky Siam. And with that, I'll go to questions unless she needs to speak. I see her shaking her head no. Representative Nash, do you want to be the last questioner or do you want to go in right now?
Oh, I can jump in now, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the author, thanks for bringing the bill. Would it be fair to say that this might be sort of like a formalization of embassies being set up with other government? To me, that if I were to try to describe that to somebody that doesn't live at the Capitol every day, would that be a fair assessment in your opinion?
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to be clear, and I think we all know this, but we can't as a legislature tell tribal nations what to do. But what this bill would do would say that would be sort of, I think that's an apt comparison, except that it's not, this itself is a bill that we would pass here and is not a contract
Right.
between ourselves and the tribal governments, because we can't tell them what to do as a separate government. But this would just formalize our intention in the way that we as a state interact with these tribal nations.
Representative Nash.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, Representative Becker-Finn, I tried to find the most apt thing to compare it to. And I think it's a good idea. I think that, we should work with the folks who we live next to, but are of different governments. And I think that this is a fine approach to do that, and appreciate you bringing the bill.
Thank you, Representative Nash. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Becker-Finn. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the language. I, too, am supportive of the bill. The only question I have is I'm wondering if you could give us maybe some examples or clarification on lines 2.19 through 2.22, talking about matters that have tribal implications. It seems like, and it is further defined, right, that have substantial direct effects on one or more Minnesota tribal government or on the distribution of power and responsibilities between the state and the tribal governments. I'm wondering if you can give us some examples of things that would fall into this and things that might not fall into this, because it seems like if we think of it broadly, almost anything could fall into this, but it seems like you're trying to be more specific with that language.
Representative Becker-Finn or one of your testifiers.
Thank you, Chair Nelson. And I guess off the top of my head, for instance, something like, let's talk chronic wasting disease. So a DNR regulation or the things that we do within the DNR and the Board of Animal Health might implicate how a disease spreads within the state. We may not have any positive CWD cases that are within reservation boundaries, but it would have great implications for a tribe if it impacted the wild deer herd and the ability of tribal members to have deer that they could safely harvest and eat. So that would be one example. I'm sure Mr. Brown would have an example within MnDOT if you want more examples, but that would just be one sort of example of the kind of thing we're talking about, where it doesn't have to do exactly with the statute relating to interactions with tribes, but obviously would have really big implications for a tribal community if the state wasn't taking their treaty rights and other implications into account.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. And I know, as you said, Mr. Brown indicated some transportation issues with the building of bridges and whatnot that would also apply. I appreciate that.
Representative Bonner.
Just really briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to Representative Becker-Finn and to our testifiers. And of course, thank you to Mr. Larson for sharing the very regal story behind your name. It's certainly wonderful to hear that. I just wanted to briefly say, thank you for coming here to talk about this and talking about how we solidify that relationship between the tribal nations and our state. really, whenever we build something on mutual respect and we're able, that equals good governing. And so thank you, Representative Becker Finn, for bringing it forward. And thank you to our testifiers for really speaking to the heart of the matter on why those relationships are so critical for us here. Thank you.
I see no further questions. Representative Becker Finn, if you want to wrap up, and then I'll renew my motion.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really want to thank my testifiers for making time, especially President Larson for joining us this morning. It's not every day that we hear from our tribal leaders in our committees. And so I thank him for sharing his time and his perspective. I think it's incredibly important. And I just really appreciate the questions. And it really seems that members of the committee understand the gravity of this and how important this is. And so I really appreciate the seriousness and taking this, really listening this morning. I know it's hard this time of year, and I do really appreciate that. So would appreciate member support. Chimigwich.
Thank you, Representative Becker Finn. With that, I'll renew my motion that House File 903 be referred, as amended, be referred to the General Register. Ms. Spreck, if you want to take the roll.
Chair Nelson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlson,
Carlson, aye.
Representative Nash,
Aye.
Representative Bonner,
Aye.
Representative Drazkowski,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Greenman,
Aye.
Representative Cleaborn,
Aye.
Representative Kosnick,
Aye.
Representative Mason,
Aye.
Representative New Brindley,
Aye.
Representative Pulaski,
Pulaski, aye.
Representative Quam.
Aye.
With a vote of 13 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails.
The motion prevails and the bill is being referred to the General Register. Thank you, Representative Becker Finn.